My name is Doug Kaufman. For the past 40 years, I've dedicated my life and even my career to finding the root cause of disease. Join me in a team of physicians, pharmacists, and scientists, and soon you too will know the cause. And welcome aboard. Thank you so much for joining us today, folks. You know, when you're in 60, 70, 80 million households like we are, have we been blessed or what? You have to understand that not 60, 70, 80 million people are watching you. Maybe there's 50,000 people watching you, but they may not watch you tomorrow. So if they happen to tune in to Know the Cause, our show, almost 20 years old, Know the Cause, you might begin to wonder, what's this guy talking about? All I hear in my doctor's office is bacteria. He's talking about something totally different, fungus, okay? On today's Know the Cause, pharmacist Susie Cohen is going to be here to talk with us a little bit about halitosis. What's that? Oh, bad breath, halitosis. Also, don't ever forget Jenny Herbatchik. She's a nurse. She's going to be talking about a blood test for cancer that many doctors overlook. So let's get started and let's go back to the beginning. We're going to rewind today and we're going to talk about fungus. What is this stuff that Know the Cause always talks about, and can it really injure us, and how far back does our knowledge of it really go? Okay, we need to hone in on that. You know my story. I get back from Vietnam. I've got jungle rot all over my body. I'm 21 years old, and in California where I lived, it's okay to drink beer when you're 21 years old. And so my friends and I, two guys and I, moved into a beach condominium out in Playa del Rey, California, and we did a little sipping, right? All of a sudden with ringworm, which is actually a ringworm, with jungle rot, which is actually a mycobacterium, myco means fungus, with that growing on my legs and my arms, and with tempting it with beer, which is a fungal mycotoxin, all of a sudden I got sick, and I got sicker and sicker and sicker. So what I want to do today, I realized through the past 47 years, many people are sick because of fungus. Doctors learn in microbiology this much about bacteria, this much about viruses, and about that much about, I think, the most important germ that can impregnate the human body and our food supply and our medicine supply and make us sick. Okay, so we're going to talk a little bit about this little germ called fungus. First, let's define it. What is this fungus? It's a simple plant that lacks green chlorophyll. Normally it survives by eating dead or decaying vegetation. We call that a saprophyte, but it can also become a parasite in man. That is a huge wow. Fungus can parasitize us. Once it gets in our body, folks, all it needs is a warm place to live. So it's about 70 degrees in this studio right now, but it's 98 degrees inside here. It loves this. Moisture, we're mostly water. It's happy as long as we feed it, okay? Fungus was among the first proven causes of infectious disease, says Mike Rinaldi. This is back 20 years ago when I began this show. That's relevant. It was actually a worm, silkworm, south of France, where silk was a big part of their whole economy. And these silkworms started getting sick and they started dying. And someone very, very bright 150 years ago decided, gosh, they have this white mildewy disease called fungus, okay? But it was the first diagnosable disease. It wasn't bacteria, it wasn't virus, it was fungus, was the first diagnosable disease. Now, I want you to look at these dates as I go through a couple of graphics here. This is important. So our fungal exposure, look it down at the bottom, synopsis of pathology circa 1942. Fungal infections are not rare in man and are frequently serious. They said that in 1942, but look here, 1944, Duke University, in a book called The Manual of Clinical Mycology. Fungal infections are of such common occurrence, really, that we have found it necessary to consider fungal diseases in the differential diagnosis of practically every obscure infection. Let me tell you what that means. Doctors back in 1944 at Duke University said every infection deserves a differential diagnosis. That's bacteria. Really? Could it be fungus? And folks, that's hugely relevant today. Everybody gets antibiotics, and I think that's contributing not only to antibiotic resistance, but to antifungal resistance as well. But in 1944, they said every infectious disease deserves a differential diagnosis. Are you sure, doctor? No, we'll just give them antibiotics. I don't think that's right, and doctors don't think that's right. Now look at the date, 1957. in a book called Clinical and Immunologic Aspects of Fungal Diseases. And here's a quote. There is reason to believe that systemic fungal infections have been becoming more prevalent recently, and they will probably continue to increase in incidence. 1957. What were you doing in 1957, right? It's just amazing. Then finally, JAMA, Journal of the American Medical Association, said 30 years ago now, the incidence of certain fungal infections should continue to accelerate, a trend that is especially disturbing. That's wow. This goes back 60, 70 years. Uh-oh, fungus is coming, fungus is coming. And some of them were before antibiotics. The mold is called penicillium. The fungal poison it makes, thank God it's a poison, it kills tiny bacteria, is called penicillin. In tiny doses, it helps tiny organisms. It helps get rid of tiny organisms. In larger doses, it hurts bigger organisms, and we are bigger organisms. What are mycotoxins? Literally, they're fungal poisons. They're poisonous chemicals that is made by fungus. Thousands of them have now been identified, and they're capable of producing illness and death in humans and in animals, okay? And finally this, before I go to a break, and we'll lay this out, when we come back from this break, we'll see Susie, our pharmacist friend, and we'll see Nurse Jenny Herbachik. Then I want to continue this by reading you some questions, real questions, I get on a live Facebook show that I do a few hours a week right here in our studio. The three major genera of mycotoxin-producing fungi are Aspergillus, Fusarium, and there's that word, Penicillium. The major U.S. crops affected are corn, peanuts, and cotton. I'm sitting here telling you today, I am 100% convinced, 100% convinced that when we talk about serious diseases, we're talking about fungus. I think toxic shock syndrome is a moldy tampon. I think that's a huge problem and our doctors aren't looking for it, folks. How about people whose ears itch so bad? You ever put a cotton Q-tip in? If it had mold on it, it might continue. A lot of our diseases are probably intimately linked with fungus. That's the whole purpose of this show, is to try and guide you which are, which aren't. I've written on cancer, diabetes, tummy problems, skin problems, etc. More to come. We'll be right back with more of this show called Know the Cause. I have an old book, really old book. I have a collection of mycology books, The Study of Fungus, Grain Storage, The Role of Fungus in Quality Loss. Folks, we lose 10 to 50% of all the grain we grow, wheat, corn, etc., due to fungus. And that isn't, you know, we're not talking Biafra or India. We're talking about the US of A in America. This is a severe problem. You don't hear much about it, but I'm concerned when we're encouraged to eat lots of carbs, lots of bread, lots of cereals, lots of pasta, things of that sort. Aren't those made with grains? Shouldn't we be careful? So there are thousands of books like this. Grain storage. How do you do it properly? When a silo leaks a little water because it's raining, those Philentomus fungus begin feeding off the sweetness of wheat or corn or soybean, and they begin running rampant. So you have to know that. So I got a cute, I do 3 hours a week of live Facebook, 3 hours where you can ask your questions. All you got to do is go to knowthecause.com/Facebook, and you can watch me live 3 hours a week. Got a great question from my friend Clay. Hey, Doug, I'm lost. What can I eat? I hear this so often. Imagine how I felt 40 some odd years ago. There was no Doug Kaufman talking about mold, mildew, and fungus. I just knew my skin was a mess, my stomach was a mess, some of my hair had fallen out in the back. I felt miserable. And then I got it. Fungus parasitized me. From the beer I'm drinking, the antibiotics I've been on, from this mycobacterium growing on my skin, I got this stuff inside my body. And I read a book circa 1953, Parasitology, and it said grains have this mold in it and fungus must eat. So they parasitize man in order to eat. There I am. How do you starve it? You stop eating grains. So the Kaufman 1 diet is a very strict approach to avoiding not only the foods that are impregnated with these fungi, but also avoiding foods that feed the fungus. When you chew up wheat and corn and oatmeal, you mix glucose. By the time it hits your belly, it's glucose, it's sugar. So don't go there because sugar feeds fungus. Fungus needs sugar in order to thrive. So what I tried to do back in the 1970s was put a common sense diet together. Oh, there were some raised eyebrows where I was working at the hospital. You can't go off grains, that's un-American, you know. But I did, and I felt great, and the skin started to clear up. And I have since learned from many doctors' offices that I've worked in and seeing their patients how many problems are linked to fungus in our diet, in our medication, antibiotics, in our alcohol, etc. Okay, so what can you eat? Eat what fungus doesn't. Hates meat, hates fish, hates vegetables, doesn't like grapefruit. So I've got a diet together, the Kaufman 1 diet. Don't worry, Clay, you'll make it. Once you're in it 2 weeks, you can do this. My husband craves sugar in everything he eats. He can't seem to stop himself. Okay, Joanne, in a human fungal relationship, by the way, human cells and fungal cells are identical. They're now They're now studying cancer and diabetes and other diseases with fungal cells because they're so much like humans. They have a rigid cell wall, they have a nucleus with DNA in it, right? Okay, so understand the fungal cell becomes dominant in a human fungal cell relationship. Hello, I want to eat, I need some beer, I need a loaf of bread, boom, to feed the fungus, okay? If your husband is craving sugar, that may mean a gut fungal condition. There's a drug called nystatin that the doctors used to give the patients. It's from dirt, no side effects. Nystatin sops up the gut in the belly, but so do good probiotics, so does curcumin, so does oregano, so many things. Doug, I'm sore all the time and I have no energy. Please help, Judy. It sounds like me 45 years ago. Sore all the time, maybe fibromyalgia, maybe arthritis, you know, one of the arthritis diseases, and I have no energy. Pretty typical for women especially, 70%, to have chronic fatigue and ouch, soreness together, right? A concomitant condition. These, I believe, are intimately due to fungus. How do I know? Try the diet for a month. Try the Kaufman diet for a month. Starve it and see if you don't get much, much better. Doug, I have a dry sauna. What are your feelings on these? How do they really help? So the whole idea, Jackie, behind the sauna is to detoxify. Sitting in a dry sauna is good, sitting in a wet sauna is good, sitting in a far infrared sauna, FAR, far infrared, actually detoxes the organs in the body from the inside out. The perspiration smells kind of bad. You just don't feel good the first 3 or 4 times you sit in it. There's a little portable sauna that I recommend that isn't loaded with EMFs. It's $700, $800, something like that. That is a wonderful sauna, and I'll be darned, I can't think of the name of that, but we'll try and put the link on this at some time later. And understand, I think far infrared sauna is really the way to go. Now, what supplements do I take? You now know what you can eat. You eat what fungus don't. And you avoid foods that happen to feed fungus. And finally, what's your input on the ketogenic, healthy way of eating, a mixture of your way of eating and healthy keto? Would that work for me? Teresa, I'm so glad you asked because that's coming to fruition right now. Most keto diet meal replacements aren't what they're cracked up to be. I don't like the use of corn, the use of peanut oils, etc. The real good keto would have caprylic acid, lauric acid, caprolate, would have coconut oils, good fats, and would be the right percentage of fats. So, do you want to know, but I'm not into pushing people into ketosis. And I think with a combination of the Kaufman 1 diet and with a good keto powder, I'll be talking about that more in the future, I think you'd have a home run to see if your symptoms weren't intimately linked with fungus. They need to be starved. If you can't cook 3 meals a day that stop feeding fungus, then why not have a meal replacement a couple times a day? Okay? Now, when we get back from this short break, Susie, our resident pharmacist, and who else is coming on? Jenny Herbachik, our nurse, is going to teach you a little bit, and then I'll be back with more. Do you worry about breast cancer, or have you been diagnosed with breast cancer? Nurse Jenny is here to teach you a little bit about a new blood test. And then Susie, our resident pharmacist, talks about halitosis. Here we go.
Do you know someone who knocks you over with one word from their mouth? The medical term for bad breath is halitosis, and it's caused by sulfur compounds in your mouth. You could chew gum and eat the entire tin of breath mints, it ain't gonna matter. Sulfur compounds can't be quelled unless you drink green tea. A study found ingredients in green tea will neutralize the sulfur odor and make you kissable once again.
Okay, now Jenny Herbacek, my good buddy for many years. She's a registered nurse. You see her on the Cancer Connection almost every day here on Know the Cause. She's updated this book, and it's a mind blower. Cancer Free, Are You Sure? Your go-to guide for cancer testing. Thank you for coming on, Jenny, and being with us today and making us all laugh. We've had a ball here in the studio. You got cancer years ago. And you contend in this book that we are eating ourselves into not only cancer, but as you so eloquently say, all disease.
Right.
Because God didn't make a cell to beat up another cell.
Right.
What were you doing that was so offensive to your immune system back, a decade ago, that you contracted this disease called cancer?
Right. And I think first we need to understand that cancer is not something that you catch or that you inherit from your parents. Your healthy cells turn into cancer cells. And so I was a big part of that process because I didn't know what I was doing. We were at the time that I was growing this cancer. My doctor said at least 7 years I had it before they told me I had it.
Before you felt, did you feel a lump?
Mine was really deep, and I was at my yearly checkup, and they thought they had found a cyst.
Okay.
So, I love those little mini candy bars. That was when we were doing the no fat. Remember,
and since they're mini, they can't cause
right. But I would eat one every day, and that was when we were going through the no fat phase, where we thought fats were bad for us.
Right.
And so when we did have fat, it was a lot of processed fats, which messes up the phospholipid membrane on the cells, which I think causes the mitochondrial dysfunction, which with the sugar fed the new cancer cell. It was just, I was doing the American lifestyle.
It was a blessing. I hate to say this, but you actually got that disease because you're okay.
Right.
And you're now teaching people. I can't tell you how many people say to me, Doug, why should I surveil my own cancer? I hire a doctor and pay the guy, hundreds of thousands of dollars. But doctors are busy. They don't know the tests you talk about in this book. What's your favorite tests of all those?
Oh my goodness.
Early cancer detection.
Right. My favorite new one is the Videssa breast test because
Videssa.
Videssa breast test.
Videssa.
Because it's so personal for me. Because you know how many women around the country get that phone call. I'm not a fan of mammograms because I can tell you lots of blood tests in my book that will find breast cancer years before you would find it on a mammogram, in time for you not to even qualify for chemotherapy.
Same with men with prostate
yes,
disease?
Yes, I have a test in there, the Prostate Health Index, which is another test that's come out that can also stop the prostate biopsies.
And so way beyond PSA.
So many are negative. Anyway, so that test, when you get the phone call, your mammogram is unclear. So then you go and they do a 3D mammogram. And the next thing you know, they want to do a biopsy. Well, 70 to 80% of breast biopsies are negative. And let me just tell you, it's just anguish to know that you have to go to the hospital and lay and hang your breast in this hole, and they're going to numb it and stick these needles in. And they don't just stick one needle in, they're taking several samples. And after my breast biopsy, my breast looked like an eggplant.
How bad?
And just whenever I hear of a woman going to have a breast biopsy, it just
impersonal,
it makes me shudder. So there's a new test. It's a blood test that you can insist upon your doctor ordering, and this blood test looks for autoantibodies that are produced by the breast cancer cells if they are there.
You wouldn't have them if your body hadn't made an antibody response.
Right, you won't have that.
If it's negative,
right,
no
and
big
it will
deal.
tell you if you have a high number of them, and if it comes back, it will come back high or low. If it comes back high, that's pretty indicative that, and you have an imaging test that's not good, that you've got a problem. But the nice thing is, even if it comes back on the low end, hey, you've still got some of these autoantibodies. It's a wake-up call. Let's get on the Kaufman. I call the Kaufman diet phase 1 and 2. It's really an anti-cancer diet. It's an anti-everything disease diet.
And thank you for acknowledging that. That's so sweet of you. Jenny and I met many years ago. She came up with this little round thing that said no lumps, no bumps. People had it on their back, on their rear end, on their shoulders, at this symposium. And I went on the stage and said, I really like this thing, no bumps, no lumps. How do we achieve that? And then she and I met, and she told me why and how she developed no bumps, no lumps. Look, she doesn't want them anymore. And she's helping thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of people avoid those lumps and bumps. But do it early, because by the time a PSA or a mammogram picks it up, it may be too late. Heed the information that's in this book, Cancer-Free But Are You Sure? Nurse Jenny. My favorite nurse, Nurse Jenny Herbacek. Thank you for coming in.
Thanks.
And no show would be complete without a bit of an understanding. We've been talking about a lot of things today. Thank you for joining us. Thank you for telling your friends about this show. It is unique, isn't it? No show would be complete without us talking about how are we exposed to fungus. Well, we learned that antibiotics are fungus, right? But sometimes we need them. They can be life-saving, but just know after antibiotics, prebiotics and postbiotics and probiotics are probably important. You'll learn more of that on this show. Alcohol, brewer's yeast is the mold. The mycotoxin it makes is called ethanol or alcohol. And then there are foods like corn and wheat and peanut that have mold in them. What about inhaling? The last question for today I thought was so fitting. These come off Facebook, and you can listen to me live 3 hours a week on Facebook. Doug, with all the flooding this year and last, how quick does the dangerous mold begin to grow in our homes? Okay, if you've ever put a Petri dish out, you know that very quickly, within a day, you'll see a little bit of gray fuzz, a couple of days, green fuzz, black fuzz, and so forth. The mold actually begins quite quickly. To identify it takes a little bit longer. Lowe's, Home Depots, all these great hardware stores have little mold test plates. Usually they come in two. You put one outside as a control, and you put one in your bathroom or your kitchen or wherever you suspect mold is growing. Inhaling mold, I think, is the #1 contributor to lung disease, and there are lots of them. COPD, right? Asthma, there's a huge number of lung diseases. We've got clever names for them and clever drugs for them. But until you begin looking at antifungal drugs, you know, chronic sinusitis was said by the Mayo Clinic in 1999, they published this, that 96% of it, if you're talking like that, is mold related. And yet if you go to a doctor today, you're going to get an antibiotic because doctors learn infections are bacterial. I'm here to shout, many infections, when you get a fever, when your white blood count increases, many infections are mold. Just make sure the doctor rules out mold. All we're asking is, you know, how do you know this is bacterial? Well, we don't, but we'll start with an antibiotic, it's safe. Okay, just think that through, folks. That's what this show is all about, knowing that you have other options. Fungus can infect you, bacteria can infect you, viri can infect you, protozoa can infect you. But think fungus, especially if your home has been moldy, because it'll start to leak right away. The mold will start to leak right away. Then you inhale it and trap it in the sticky mucous membrane tissues within your body. Thank you so much. I look forward to seeing you Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, if you'd like, on Facebook, KnowTheCause/Facebook. We're going to go an hour a day, Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday. Thank you, Susie, and thank you so much, Jenny. Bye-bye for now.